Today I'm excited to finally announce a secret project which I've been working on for over a year now. So basically I've been making an app for perfumery. In this video I'm going to explain to you the story behind the app, how I made it, and then I'm going to explain which features are in the app and how they can help you with your own perfumery. So stay tuned. So the story really began in 2019, and this is when I spent a lot of time really properly teaching myself perfumery. And this was also the time when I was working on the first perfumes for my brand, Lux & Terra. Now, at this time, because I was making so many formulas, it quickly became difficult to keep track of them all and organize them all. Whether I wrote the formulas out on sheets of paper or notes on my computer, they all felt like these kind of separate formulas which weren't in the same place. Now, as well, the other thing was I really wanted to have all of the percentages for my formulas, which really kind of meant either calculating out by hand, which was going to take obviously too long, or writing them into a spreadsheet software. Now, I don't really like using spreadsheet software myself, and the reason for this is because firstly, the files take a long time to open up when you're using them, which can be annoying. Secondly, you usually have to have a different file for each formula. Otherwise, you're going to put them all in the same file, and then you're going to have a massive, messy file, which isn't very helpful. But the other thing about spreadsheet software is that you obviously have to do all of the maths, the calculations. You have to put that in manually yourself, and then you have to make sure you're not making mistakes. Anyway, so at the time, naturally, I felt, hey, it would be really nice to have an app to do this stuff for me. It would just kind of give me the benefits of having a nice simple notes that I just can write out quickly, but it would do all of those calculations, percentages behind the scenes without me having to actually have all of this spreadsheet software to deal with in the first place. Anyway, fast forward a few more months to early 2020, and then I was making a lot of notes on raw materials, trying to learn my raw materials a little bit better. I really found that even though I could make the notes for my raw materials, they weren't actually linked to any of the notes for the formulas I'd made. So even if I had gone and used a raw material in 10 or so formulas, when I looked at my notes for the raw material, I wouldn't be any of the wiser to the places I'd used it in without actually having to open up all of my formulas and go and manually look through for that raw material, which again is quite a time-consuming thing. So again, I thought here, this would be really cool if I had an app which, when I looked at my raw materials, I could instantly see all of the different formulas it was used in to give me ideas on how else I can use that same raw material in the future. Anyway, a few months after this, in March, I just released my next perfume, which was called Moonlight Harvest, and what I planned to do was spend a lot of time going to markets to try to sell it. But this was the exact same time that the lockdown happened because of the pandemic. So due to this, I couldn't actually go out and start selling my perfume at all. So what I did was I took a brief job in a factory for a little while making ventilator parts, and while I was there I started thinking what I could do in lockdown to still do something good for the business. And what I thought was this app would actually be a really good idea because it would actually help me to make perfumes much more efficiently in the future, and it would also help me to upgrade my own perfumery skills. So what I did was I bought some books on Swift. Now, if you don't know what Swift is a programming language. What that basically means is it's a way to write code which you can use to talk to the computer, and that code can actually be bundled up in the form of an app and basically do whatever you want with it. So in this case, I thought I could learn Swift and use it to write my perfumery app. Now, this isn't something that I was completely new to, as I have done coding before, and I also did do a bit of Swift a few years back before this. However, I only did some very beginner tutorials, and I never really got very far with it, never really got to making a proper app that could be released. This time, I thought I would go in, really get good at it, and get to the point where I could actually make this app. Now, it was also around this time which I actually started off my YouTube channel. And my first videos on my channel were actually videos where I talked about natural raw materials when I was trying to improve learning them actually for myself. And as part of that process, I made a series of PDFs, which were basically like fact sheets or information cards for the raw material, so they kind of had all of the information about the raw material. Now, I really liked this idea at the time. I thought the PDFs looked pretty good, and also subsequently in the comments, some people said they liked that idea as well. So what I thought would be a good idea was to really incorporate this idea of having kind of fact cards for your raw materials, almost a bit like little info cards that you can kind of revise your knowledge from in the future. I thought it would be a really good idea to actually have that as part of the app. So in the next months after that, what I really worked on was starting off my app, and what I developed was this way of having this kind of ingredient or this raw material card view inside the app, which you could use as a place to add new raw materials, and then you could store all of the information. So things like their name, the IFRA limit, how much it cost you, which supplier you bought it from, and then any descriptions as well. So if you make an evaluation, then you write down what it smells like. You can have that as a place to store what it smells like, and that's really useful when you're actually learning the raw materials, having a reference to go back in, say, 3 months' time. When I did the evaluations in, say, January, what did it smell like? And then you come back in April and you think, okay, you smell it again, and then you can smell it, compare with your notes from before, and see if you picked up any new things you didn't notice before. And that way, you really get a good idea for your raw materials. Anyway, after working on the app for a couple of months, I actually had to go and get a full-time job and then move house for that full-time job as well. And that meant I didn't actually have enough time to work on the app for the rest of the year. However, at the beginning of this year, I picked up work on the app again, and I've been doing that ever since about February or so. And I'm really happy to say, finally, as of this week, the app is finished and released on the App Store. So I'm going to take the rest of this video to explain to you guys what it does, and you can also download it for free to try out if you want as well. So I'll talk about that at the end, but there's also a link in the description. Okay, so now I'm going to share my screen and walk you through the app and its features. So the first thing to note is that the app is actually available on iPhone, iPad and Mac. But in this screen share, I'm just going to show you it on iPad because I think that's in the middle of the 3 devices. So firstly, when you open the app on the iPad, what you get is the Raw Materials tab. And that consists of both your raw materials library and your raw materials cards. Firstly, looking at the raw materials library on the left-hand side, what it basically is a list of all of your raw materials. Now, you can search that list to find certain raw materials, and what you'll find is all the raw materials actually appear under a category header, which is a certain color that you can set for the category of raw material. We'll get onto that later. Now looking at the right hand side, what you can see is the raw materials card itself. So you can go and select different raw materials to open up the card for that raw material. Now, once you've opened that card, you can set a number of properties. So there's firstly the name, then there's some space for things like the CAS number or botanical name. Then you get a chance to set the category. And the next thing is you can actually put in the supplier. So if you open up the supplier, what you'll see is you have a chance to save all of the suppliers that you use and put them in, and then select those for all the raw materials you bought them from. Then you have a thing for your inventory, so you can basically put whatever you want in there, but the idea is you put how much you have to keep track of that. Then you have the cost per gram. Now this is something that's quite important because this cost per gram is actually used later on in the formulas to calculate the cost of the formula you've made. Now a cool feature here is that you can actually long press on the cost or right click on Mac, and you can enter the calculate cost, which simply means if you don't already have a calculator handy, you can quickly just put in how many grams you bought, how much it cost you, and it will work that out for you automatically. Next, we have some space for the IFRA limit. Again, this is something that's quite important because it's again used when you're making your formulas, and the app can actually automatically tell you based on this limit if that you've gone over the IFRA limit for a raw material in the formula that you've made. So this space, you put in the percent of the IFRA limit, which is something you can find on the IFRA website, and then the app can use that information in the future. Next, we have date, which is a space to put when you bought the raw material, just so you can keep track of that. And then is the fragrance pyramid. So traditionally in perfumery, you've got a fragrance pyramid, which is top, mid, and base notes. I thought in this app, I would actually break it down into 5 levels just to give you a little bit more control, especially because sometimes raw materials are kind of somewhere in between top and mid notes. Now this gives you the opportunity to actually use that knowledge as well. Below that, you have description. Here you can put all of your main notes about the raw material. This could be anything from the way it's extracted to the way it smells. And then after that, we have a special tag, which is to treat things as solvent. Most of the time, you don't want to treat things as solvent, but what it's there for is basically your actual perfumer's alcohol you can have that as a solvent, and later on when we get to the formula side, there's lots of options for dealing with dilutions that can actually make use of this when the raw material is a solvent. After that, we have dilutions. So on this dilutions table, you have a chance to store all the different dilutions that you have. And you also have the chance here to put the date you made those dilutions so you can remember if they're getting old and might need to be refreshed. You can also expand out this little box and write some description specific to that dilution. So this is something I found, especially with raw materials, is that they really can vary in how they smell across different concentration levels. So definitely having a slot to be able to explain how they smell at 10% or 1% or something else can be really useful, especially when you're comparing against your formula usage, which is the table right below. So the formula usage is basically all of the times you've used that raw material in a formula. And what you can do with this is get an idea for how much you're actually using in your formulas and what levels are good to use for that raw material. And over time, you can build up a really nice picture of if the raw material is quite strong, you might notice you're using it quite often at a low concentration. And that will help you in the future when you go to make a blend with that raw material. You can already know in advance that you want to start with using it at a low concentration rather than making the same mistake as before, using it at a high concentration and then wasting your whole trial blend and having to start again. Now, before I move on to talking about formulas, I really want to emphasize how much this app gives you control over the categories you put your raw materials in. If you go to the top left-hand corner of the raw materials library, you can click to get the category manager. And this is where you manage all of your raw materials categories. You can add a new category for your raw materials, give it a name, and then it comes up in the list. Now you've done that, you can actually click on the color swatch, and what I've done here is designed a whole color palette which you can use to pick colors for your raw materials categories, and these colors also adapt to dark mode. So if you're using the app in dark mode, the colors will actually adapt to work well against the black background as well. Once you've done that, you can select your color and name your raw materials categories. Don't worry, if you name the category wrong, you can also simply just change the name of the category and then it will update on all the raw materials that it's in. Okay, so that's the raw materials side. Next, let's switch over to the formulas tab, which is the other half of the app. Now, when you switch to this screen, it looks quite similar to the raw materials side, apart from the only obvious difference is everything is based on formulas except for raw materials. So as you can see here, I've already put in the 4 accords that I made in my YouTube videos on my channel, and I've added those as formulas into the app. Before we actually look at the formulas themselves, I'll just quickly show you that again, for formulas, you can also manage the categories in the same way as raw materials, though this time I don't give the option to put a color, just because I think it would be too confusing if you could give colors to both your formulas and your raw materials. Next, let's actually go in and have a look at the formulas themselves. So when you open up a formula, you've got its title on the top, and then you've got a row for each formula entry. Now, in the formula entries, you firstly have the fragrance pyramid colored by the category of the raw material. So this is really to help you remember what this raw material is actually doing in the formula. If it's a green top note like cis-3-hexanol, for example, or a mid note like methylanthranilate. Next to the names for the raw materials, you've also got the dilution to help you remember which dilution you're actually using in this formula. We'll come back to that later. Next, we have the space in the formula entry where you actually set the weight of your raw materials. This is essentially where you actually write your formulas. You tap on the weight field for the entry and then you get to type in whatever weight you want to assign for that formula entry. The final column of the formula entries is actually the column where all of the calculated values appear. So by default, this is set to absolute percentage of the formula entry in the formula, but if you tap anywhere on this column, the column will actually change firstly to relative percentage of all the entries in the formula, and finally to the cost of all of the formula entries in the formula. That's worked out from that cost per gram that you assigned earlier in the raw materials card if you set it. At the bottom of the formula, you have the totals which have been calculated for you, and then finally you have the space where you can add a new formula entry if you want. If you want to delete an entry on the other hand, you simply have to long press it like most things in the app, which gives you the option to delete it. Now, while we've got this long press up, let's view the other options that we've got available. So first we've got view raw material. This just takes you back to the raw materials card on the raw materials side of the app. Secondly, we have 3 options for marking the formula entries as too strong or too weak, or just removing a mark that you might have previously set. This can be really helpful when you've been making your trial blends but you notice a certain thing is too strong. If you mark it as too strong or too weak, then it's going to highlight it in red or blue. The reason that this is so helpful is because when you go back to your raw materials cards and look at your usage table, those marks will also still be applied. So you'll be able to see if you've marked a certain raw material too strong at say 5%, you'll know that. So next time you go to use that same raw material, you can see that it's a good chance that 5% might be too strong again. Next, you have the option to change raw material, and this just means that if you've already got a raw material but you want to switch it out for something else in your formula, you just press change raw material and then you get the new raw material in its place. Now, the other thing about the formula side is there's some more options at the top. So firstly, you've got this option to share, or if you're on your Mac, an option to just save the file to your Mac. This by default is a PDF file of your formula, but also in the settings of the app, you can change it to a TSV, which is a file you can read in spreadsheet software, or a markdown file, which you can use in note-taking apps. Here, you've also got the opportunity to duplicate formulas. This is useful if you want to iterate a formula to a new version, just making a few small changes. And then after that, you've got an option to sort the formula. Now, basically what this does is just allows you to pick something you're interested in. So let's say it's category or percentage, and the formula entries just get sorted by that property. Finally, you've got the formula statistics screen, and this effectively brings up a card, a bit like the raw materials card, but this time for the formulas. So again, here you can pick the category, which is how you set the category of your formula. Below that, you've got a chart of the fragrance pyramid. So all of the fragrance pyramid markings you set in the raw materials card, these are now brought forward, and the formulas calculation engine actually goes and works out the concentration of each of those top, middle, and base notes and puts that in a nice visual representation so you can see visually if your formula looks like it's going to last a long time or not. Finally, you've got the fingerprint for your formula. This is essentially the same as the fragrance pyramid diagram above, but this time it's looking at the percentages of the different raw materials categories that you've used in your formula. And the nice thing here is that the colors still stay the same as the raw materials categories that you've used, so you can really quickly get a visual representation of what your formula might smell like, as well as just how long it will last. Finally, the other main feature that the app offers is the ability to work with dilutions and scale your formulas. So if you go and tap or click on a formula entry, you're going to bring up this new page which allows you to firstly change the dilution of the formulas. It essentially gives you a choice of all the dilutions that you already put in the raw materials card, and allows you to select which one to add. There's also a couple of different methods of changing the dilution depending on how you want to do it. If you want to learn more about these, then look at the website. If you go back and now tap on the total entry instead of one specific formula entry, again, you get another scaling screen. Again, I'll ask you to look online if you want to learn more about this, because it's kind of difficult to explain quickly. But basically, again, it allows you to scale the whole formula to a new weight or by a scaling factor. You can also do a scaling option where you take the concentration of your raw materials and say you want your perfume to be a bit stronger. Well, you can actually scale up the concentration of your raw materials by removing weight from the solvent automatically until you reach that desired concentration. This is all handled for you by the scaling engine. So if you want to learn more about this, then again, I would say check out the website. I might do a demo about this as well in a future video. So yeah, that's about it for the demo. Glad you're still watching. Hopefully this app is something that could really help you in your perfumery. All of the links to the website and the App Store links are in the description of this video. Now, you can actually try this app out completely for free. So the way it works basically is you can use all of the features for free up to a limit of 25 raw materials and 25 formulas. And then after that, you'll be prompted if you want to buy the full version, which allows you to make unlimited raw materials and unlimited formulas. Now, the pricing does vary by which region you're in and which currency you use, so I won't be able to tell you the exact price, but I did try to make it as cheap as possible. If you want to check out the price, just go to the App Store and the price should either be there, Otherwise, just download it and try to make as many formulas or raw materials until you get prompted with the in-app purchase, and then it will let you know how much it costs. Now, the other thing is, I'm really looking forward to all of your guys' feedback about the app when you've downloaded it and tried it out. So if you've downloaded the app, please do leave a comment under this video letting me know what you thought of it. Also consider leaving a review on the App Store, as that helps other people work out if they think the app will be good for them or not. I may also make a Discord server for discussing both tips for using the app, but also tips for perfumery in general. So if you're interested in this, let me know. I'm not sure if I'll do it yet, but definitely let me know if that's something you think you would join. And finally, sorry that I haven't been posting any videos recently. Hopefully you can understand that all the time I would normally spend doing the videos, I've been making sure that all of this stuff is ready for release. Now that this is done, soon I should be able to get back to making some more regular videos on perfumery, so if you're not already subscribed to the channel, be sure to subscribe, and you should get a new video about perfumery coming sometime soon, hopefully in a week or two. So apart from that, thanks for watching and see you soon.